Good day. I'm Peter Coffey, Vice President for Strategic Research at Salesforce, and it's my privilege to welcome you to this second of three planned prologues to this year's Phorum conference conducted each year by the Philadelphia Alliance for Capital and Technologies. We considered last week some of the challenges and the prospects for the talent pool. That's a resource that is clearly critical to addressing concerns and pursuing opportunities in the coming years and decades. This week, we'd like to consider the role of machine intelligence in complementing that human talent as those concerns and opportunities emerge and evolve at new levels of speed and scale. Let me note that this year's conference theme wraps its identified challenges in the warning label of volatility, which in many ways seems to be even more of an issue this year than it was during even the most dangerous periods of the COVID-19 pandemic. That might seem like the opposite of what we might expect, as the world seems to be exiting from that public health and economic ordeal. But let's zoom out and consider the big picture, the context in which the current surge of AI activity seems especially well-timed. In 2020, the world went into pandemic more or less together, with curves on our graphs of what was going on that were daunting but somewhat predictable. These were biological and economic behaviors. They were more extreme than what we usually see, but these are families of behavior that we have some ability to understand and anticipate. Exit from pandemic has been and is continuing to be quite different. It has proceeded on widely varying schedules and has followed chaotic paths for different industries, for different regions, even for different generations. With our working years becoming longer, the number of different generations that are represented in a single workplace is growing, and the challenges that arise from that were among the things we discussed last week, but that diversity of experience is further complicated by political and geopolitical factors, including domestic politics in the US, cross-border conflicts in Eastern Europe, new alignments in the Asia-Pacific region, and all of these things further disturbed by climate-related challenges that will surely continue to grow. These are things that are inherently unpredictable to the degree that they sometimes hinge on decisions of individual business and political leaders, and also depend on the vagaries of nature. As George Friedman said in his book, The Next Decade, a decade is the point at which history and statesmanship meet, and a span in which policies still matter. The role of our forum communities in enabling policies with the innovations that they create and altering policy options with the investments that they direct is very much on our minds as we finalize this year's program. This brings us to the specific topic for this week: the status and direction and prospects for AI as both an ingredient of dramatic change and a coping tool for keeping pace with it. Forum is vigorously committed to serving its multiple communities of innovators, investors, and practitioners. Each of those communities has a powerful reason to be greatly interested in what's different this time about AI, given its history of cycles of hype and disappointment, and also to be attuned to what's not different, so we can do a better job of matching expectations and hopes to the realities of implementation, operation, and governance. Innovators are looking for ways to differentiate their use of technologies like generative AI and avoid being merely part of the pack that is already numbering dozens of startups with surprisingly low barriers to entry. Investors with multi-decade memories or with competent Googling skills are aware of the periods of AI winter that have more than once turned hopes of AI profits into realities of disappointing money pits. Meanwhile, practitioners are testing the edges of a double-edged sword, wondering what these technologies can do for them, while also wondering if these technologies are going to replace them, or at the very least, compete with them. It's not fantastical to wonder, if one is a technical professional or a parent, if these technologies will reduce the value of present skills, and to wonder what we should tell the next generation to study if their goal is a rewarding career. You may have noticed that I referred a moment ago to generative AI without using the name of ChatGPT. Until just now, I had not even mentioned that name, and that's quite a deliberate choice, even though ChatGPT has literally over 100 times the Google search traffic volume of the more general and more correct term. ChatGPT is becoming the Kleenex and the Band-Aid of AI, the term people use for asking machines to do smart stuff. But ChatGPT is just a software company's trademark for a conversational front-end application that enables interaction with actually interesting back-ends, including GPT-4 and GPT-5. Those, in turn, are that same company's proprietary examples of a class of software artifacts called generative pre-trained transformers, which are further just a special case of a domain known as large language models. And I'm really sorry if this seems like pedantic labeling, but these words matter because they can guide our expectations and inform our cautions. Generative means that it can produce results that are not just regurgitations of input, which is something that earlier generations of AI, like expert systems, did not do to nearly so great or so interesting a degree. Pre-trained means that choices of training data will shape those creative results. Is the creator the person who chose the training data? Or the person who composed the prompt to the system that triggered that output? Or the person who wrote the code in between? Or does the word creative not even apply as a matter of law? The US Copyright Office has ruled firmly that when an AI technology determines the expressive elements of its output, the generated material is not the product of human authorship. As a result, that material is not protected by copyright and must be disclaimed in a registration application. I think we can agree that law will be challenged to keep up with changing reality in this field. Perhaps most important, though, is the word transformer, because it's a warning that the results might be useful, or they might be hallucinations, which is the technical term for something that the system just seems to make up and then state with unwavering confidence. Tim Harford, who often writes for the Financial Times, said last month that ChatGPT says a lot of true things, but it says them only as a byproduct of learning to seem believable. There are plenty of situations in which that sounds good is all we need, but that sounds as if it might be right, or even the machine said it so it must be right, are roads we probably don't want to go down. Keeping those three things in mind, we can now ask the questions that I said we'd try to answer this week. What's meaningfully and usefully different this time, and what's importantly the same? What was the first AI winter? You'll find different definitions, but I believe it's a consensus that during roughly 1974 to 1980, optimistic funding of ambitious projects collapsed when the results seemed only useful for laboratory demonstrations. In one case, a system that was supposed to recognize speech could only do it if words were spoken in a particular order. The hardware simply wasn't there. At an AI conference in 1985, for example, I saw Tektronix offer something that it called an AI workstation that had a maximum of 4 megabytes of memory, but was claimed to be a cost-effectiveness breakthrough at its price of $24,000. If you use the general rate of inflation since then, that was the 1985 equivalent of about $67,000 today, for what was mostly just an object-oriented programming console with really great graphics. But a team at Stanford has demonstrated recently that it can build, and has built, something comparable to ChatGPT for a total cost of about $600. When something far better is 100 times cheaper, you don't just do more of the old stuff, you do stuff differently. And what I expect is that building a private GPT for a specific dataset is going to become as common as building a specialized spreadsheet for a particular business function. 100-fold cost reduction is a difference that makes a difference. What about the second AI winter? Again, the literature offers various definitions, but there's consensus that between 1987 and 1993, there was a pretty dramatic implosion of companies that had built some much more impressive things than the previous generation of AI efforts, but that failed to prove their practicality over the long term. One notable example was an expert system at Digital Equipment Corporation that grew, during a period of 7 years of use, to a collection of 6,200 rules with half of them, on average, needing to be updated every year. The task of knowledge maintenance required more people with more skills than it was practical to hire, train, and sustain. What's the difference that keeps us from having this happen again? We've shifted our emphasis from human curated rule bases to machine managed learning from datasets, in the same way that Google's PageRank algorithm eventually crushed the library science approach of the Yahoo directory. When people are in the pipeline of knowledge acquisition and maintenance, growing scale is a growing problem. When the machine manages its own learning, growing scale has the potential to become increasing richness and value. If the chilling constraints that drove the two AI winters are now substantially less limiting, are there new considerations that could cool the current enthusiasm in other ways? There's one in particular, which is the degree to which these systems defy important disciplines of software development. When we depend on software for useful results in critical situations, we have well-established practices for constructing tests and confirming proper function using synthetic data sets. The systems being built today will inherently change their behavior as a function of the history of their use, with the result that continuous monitoring, rather than pre-deployment test and verification, may become a costly and continuing cost of their use. Another consideration is the holistic character of that interaction with training, knowledge, and operational experience. We can legislate a right to be forgotten, in the phrase often associated with European Union data privacy rules, including GDPR, but we don't have that kind of granularity in the accumulating state of a GPT. Compliance considerations seem certain to arise. I said we'd look at the big picture. What's apparent is that AI systems will be powerful complements to other components of an enterprise or other IT portfolio, but investors and practitioners will do well to notice that new technology hardly ever sweeps the old entirely aside. As recently as September of last year, for example, it was estimated that 80% of in-person transactions and 43% of banking systems are still relying on COBOL, a technology old enough to apply for Social Security as of last year. And ironically, there's COBOL calculating those Social Security benefits right now, according to reports from January of this year. Will a GPT conversational interface make it easier for future new retirees to apply? Almost certainly, and soon. Will it still be COBOL cutting their checks? That's also a credible prediction. We'll be back next week with our third Forum prologue, looking at the trends and the breakout possibilities in the domains of environmental, social, and governance priorities and practices as part of the environment for innovation. May 3rd will come soon after that, and we'll be looking forward to bringing you the 2023 edition of Forum. For the Philadelphia Alliance for Capital and Technologies, I'm Peter Coffey with Salesforce, looking forward to what we'll learn together.